nice to you?
I don't know. I think that they just, the way that they grew up, they probably, learned respect early. They had nice families or something. Um, and definitely the environment that they were in Olympia, Washington, I pretty much had to be nice to girls. Which,
Why?
well, you might get a lot of flack. Well, no, I mean, I'm sure they didn't feel like they had to be fucking nice to every fucking girl just because it was Olympia, but it was great. They were sweet and supportive of like young boys and girls doing art and music. So, um,
Do you think they had that same kind of? Would you say? Do you think that that came out of the relationship they had with each other, or do you know what I'm saying? Like if they could support others because they supported each other like that, or you know?
Yeah, maybe it came from the way that they grew up together and their friendship with one another. I never thought about that until just now. um, yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So how would you describe Scott? Like, what was his personality like?
Well, his nickname is Maniac for a reason, probably.
Or can you say Scott's name is me?
Oh, Scott's nickname was Maniac for a reason, probably. He had a maniacal laugh that was really loud, and him walking into a room was like just loud. Or kicking out of people out of Thekla was just incredibly loud. He did everything with a lot of force, whether it be laughing or playing drums. What was the question?
Oh, just what he was like.
Scott was kind of hot and cold, I guess. Sometimes he was really incredibly sweet, and sometimes he was severely mean. I guess after Carp, we kind of figured out there's a lot more going on with Scott than we ever really knew about. But
What was that?
I think he kind of kept changing his mind about what kind of person he was. He went through some phases, I guess. But he was always Scott. Yeah.
What was your sense of what that time period was like when Chris started kind of diving into his malarkey, and like maybe discuss like if you noticed what it was like for him at first, and then as things got more serious, and then maybe inevitably when it was Capuzzo.
Honestly, I think that I was probably in and out of town a lot. I just didn't see him very much when he started doing that kind of stuff. Even though I was really close with Audrey, who he was with at the time. Did you get to talk to Audrey?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Where does she live?
She lives in Oakland.
Oh,
She's married to
Do you have
Jesse
her
Michaels.
email or something? I'm going there on Friday.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything to do Friday night because the
Totally.
agency wanted to charge
She's a
me $200
producer
to
now.
film there.
Have you talked to her? Or talked to people about her, that she's like a film producer now?
Actually, she did a documentary.
Yeah.
They won an Academy Award or something.
Yes. Or it was nominated for one.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What was the doc?
No End in Sight? It's an Iraq War documentary.
No, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
That's huge doc.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's cool. No, I would love to try to talk to her. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Let me just.
Sorry,
You down for a few more
Sure.
closers?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let's see. So, what did you think when, like, can you describe like the ending parts of like towards the breakup and aftermath?
I honestly don't remember when they broke up. I must have, like I said, been in and out of town on tour a lot, and it's not like they had a concise breakup show the way Unwound did, where I was living in New York and flew back to see the last show ever. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe they did the fizzle type of breakup. Do you know? I don't really know.
Yeah, there was a couple stops.
Yeah.
I basically just kind of think of it as the, the 98 kind of, like.
After that yo-yo show, I don't really remember them doing much after that. Like maybe they did like one of their half tours where they come home. I think they did that a few times. Something about them would all bring out the worst in each other too. So, and then touring is always for anybody like the magnifying glass on a good or bad personality, and then things can just implode, I suppose. But yeah, poor guys. So many people didn't get to see them because of aborted tours. It's unfortunate. But yeah, the end, just that show at that festival was just kind of what I thought was maybe them beginning again, but now I realize must have just been the end of them.
Yeah, can you describe what you're talking about? Yo-Yo 97.
Yeah.
Right? Can you describe what you were talking about?
Yeah. I think that the end might have been what I thought was the beginning at Yo-Yo 97. But then looking back, I realized that was probably it. And that's maybe why I took it, or, everybody had a heavy time.
I don't understand that.
Oh, really?
No, you would think what you thought was the end was the beginning. I don't get it.
Well, okay, so they, the Chris incident and then them coming back and doing Yo-Yo, what I thought, and I was so happy because I thought it was, Carp back on its feet again, but I realized that was probably the end of that band, was that show. I don't know if I don't think I was thinking that at the time though. But
And how does that make you feel, like, or made you feel when you realized, like, oh, we've reached the end of the road? Maybe you didn't necessarily even had an end.
I think for me, like, that show is probably when I was thinking about it, and I didn't really think much about them as a band after, even though I was probably living with either Jared or Scott at the time. I mean, we all had other things going on in bands, our own bands and stuff, so, and I think just our friendship was more important than the band anyways, so I didn't think about it really. I didn't think like, Carp broke up, I'm so mad, I just, I had other things going on.
Sure.
And, if they would have broken up in 95 when I was, younger, that probably would have been a huge deal to me. But I was already jaded by the time I was 19, man.
So you're saying you weren't really around, like, the period after the breakup?
The period after the breakup is when I was doing probably 5 bands at a time, going in and out of town, and probably thinking more about me and my bands than anybody else's band. So, yeah.
So you mentioned it a little bit before, but tell me what you were thinking when the whip happened.
I had just moved to LA. This was probably 7 years ago. And the whip came through town. I was really excited that Jared and Scott were playing together. It seemed like a miracle with Joe, which was just brilliant. And then, the sound was like insane. The show that I saw just sounded incredible. And it was a lot different from Carp because the guitar was sort of more of a focus in this band, and for some reason I got really, nothing had happened, but except that they played a great show, but it made me really emotional, and I cried at that Whip show, and then the next night my band played with the Whip at the Smell, and I don't remember it at all, but I do remember Scott coming over to my new apartment and laughing maniacally at my room because it just looked so much like my room in every other city or house I'd lived in. And that was a nice feeling that he recognized that or whatever.
What did it mean to you to see Jared and Scott playing together again?
I mean, it felt, I was overwhelmed that it was just the most perfect union. And I'm sure everybody that got to see the Whip felt that way. I was really excited about them. I was really, really excited that it was just beyond. It was great. It was a perfect band, actually. One West Coast tour.
Yeah, and then what happened?
Well, I don't know how much longer after that, maybe 3 months, I got a phone call that Scott died in a freak accident. That was really rough and completely took everybody by surprise. So, it's crazy. I have so many pictures. His memorial was just crazy. Amazing people and conversations all night. It was special. But I have all these pictures that I still haven't gotten developed. I'm terrified to look at them. But maybe someday. So yeah, that was the end of the Whip.
Why don't you develop those pictures?
Why don't I? I want to, but it'd be kind of crazy. That night was pretty special, but I didn't. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe someday I'll have the guts to get them developed.
You're just afraid of what you'll feel?
Pretty much. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to have to go through it, the whole thing again.
And where does that come from? Are you talking about your love for him?
Yeah, definitely. He was a huge part of my youth.
What do you think when you think about him now?
Happy thoughts. Just him laughing, mostly.
What did you think that was like for Jared to kind of have that travesty with Chris and then pick himself back up and have, what happened to him happen,
He must be very strong. I don't know how he's been able to keep doing stuff. Um, but yeah, it's pretty impressive that he's plugging away. I'm sure there's a lot that I haven't talked to him about, yet. So,
Do you see Carp in what he does now?
absolutely, everything he does.
Can you maybe say that in a complete sentence?
Yeah, everything I've heard Jared do since I definitely hear Carp. He's been in a lot of bands, in our little rock and roll band called the Itty Bitty Booty Band. Sounds, just distinctly Jared. I don't know, which is distinctly Carp. So.
What do you think Scott's reaction would have been if he would have lived to find out about Jared joining the Nuggets?
Scott knew Jared would ever do that. I'm sure he would be happy about it. I don't know. Scott had a lot of different ways of feeling about things. He could be, like I said before, hot and cold about people and situations. You just never knew how he was going to react, actually, I think.
What do you think he felt about Jared?
How Scott felt about Jared. Maybe like a big brother type thing. I don't know. I know they have their share of conflict, but that's what it kind of seemed like to me, I think.
What?
Kind of looked up to Jared maybe a little bit.
Could you say Scott to start out like with like all in one?
To me, it seemed like Scott maybe looked up to Jared in a way, like a big brother way, maybe.
Because was it some things Jared was good at that he felt like he wasn't good at? Is that what you're talking about, or?
Yeah. Gosh, I'm sorry. I just never really thought about this stuff or put it into words before. Yeah, there's probably some things about Jared that came to Jared easily that Scott was frustrated with, maybe, and there's. I think Scott just had a hard time, just the way everybody treated him, and he tried to rise to the challenge with all the things that Chris and Jared would do, just hanging out with people, but sometimes Scott kind of fell flat.
I don't understand exactly what you mean, like with the way people treated him and.
Well, I kind of feel like people treated him like he was dumb. Nobody really said this to you?
No, I never heard that.
It's so weird.
I expected that he would be really intelligent.
He was, absolutely, but there's something missing. There was a connection sort of missing where Scott was just kind of like the butt of their jokes a lot of the time. I don't know. And I don't know if Scott just had a harder time, I think, just communicating with people rather than Chris and Jared. It came pretty easily too.
From him, like what were the, if there's something that the way that he completed the circle, Scott.
Well, I mean, they all egged each other on, sort of, but I think Scott was probably like the biggest cheerleader for Chris and Jared's antics, maybe. Um, Maybe even just in the way that he laughed. um, but I don't know. Aside from his obvious skill, personality-wise, it's been a little too long for me to really remember all that stuff.
Can you give me a brief description of the Lucky Seven house?
Lucky Seven was, when I first moved in, I think there was still a pool table in the living room and Kiss pinball in the kitchen. I had a basement room for $90. Everyone that lived in the house, our bands would practice there, except for Unwound. I don't know where they practiced, but we'd have shows pretty frequently. When I moved in, they kind of didn't want to have shows anymore. It was like Jared and Brent, or not Jared, but Justin Trosper and Brent Turner and all these people that were getting a little bit older and not as into the idea. But I ended up convincing them to do a bunch of shows there. And then they would, in turn, like, eventually something would come along that they'd want to do, like a steel pool bathtub show or something. But Carp and Fitz played in the basement a lot. I think, and Wound, Bikini Kill. The pictures of the house that I see now, like, don't make me. I don't think it was that gross. Like, you know, there was a giant pile of bottles and cans in the kitchen that got pretty out of control. But like dirty dishes, not so bad. Moldy food, not so bad. I think that when Justin and Brent Turner and Paul Schuster were my roommates, they were kind of like into, you know, watching Kenneth Anger movies and listening to jazz and dub and not really, and kind of cleaning up, being adulty, fake adults, even though they were probably like 21, they're kind of like fake adults. And then by the time like Jared and Sean moved in, and Scott eventually, it was kind of more of a party house again, and we partied a lot.
What was Olympia like back then?
Olympia was now it's you know, every other storefront is owned by, you know, someone I know or was around in those days, probably just going to college or something, but now they're all business owners, so that's kind of weird. But there was, you know, a few places downtown. It was so small, but you know, you'd always go to the theater or the Smithfield and you'd run into your friends and you'd just shoot the shit, and most likely Jared, Scott, or Chris would be there to shoot the shit with, and just drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes, hanging out on the street corner was the norm, and trying to figure out where you were going to hang out that night. And nobody seemed to work, really. I worked sometimes, kill rock stars. I didn't get hired until on the books until I was about 19, but I started working there when I was 16, off the books, and then we all worked at the movie theater. I remember definitely Scott working there. Jared and Chris probably worked there at some point. I don't know if I worked with them or not. I can't remember. But
so you're talking about the State Theater,
the State
right?
Tri-Theater, yeah. Not this, because there's the State, oh no, there's, yeah, the Capitol Theater and the State Tri-Theater. State Tri-Theater showed second-run movies for $1, and Scott was the projectionist. Every Thursday night, we would preview the films that would come in to show to open on Friday. So we turned those into our party nights, and everybody would bring beer and sometimes a Ouija board or whatever. Like bands would record there. Thursday nights was our night to take over. Well, pretty much any night of the week. But yeah, Scott was always like wanted to play by the rules at the theater, and we all always wanted to go crazy and fuck shit up.
Why did he want to play by the rules?
He was kind of like that sometimes. He kind of liked authority. Like when he worked at Thekla, I'm pretty sure he enjoyed like screaming at people that, last call or get the fuck out, close out your tabs. I think there's part of him that liked being in charge of something because maybe he didn't feel in charge of the band at all.
You don't think he did?
Probably not. I'm sure that Jared and Chris called the shots.
Which is
pretty sure of that.
Weird. I'd have to say, like, listening to the music and
You
watching
think
the
like
footage, you'd think that
the drums were driving
opposite.
it. I think that that is not the case at all. It's definitely Jared and Chris calling the shots, and that's I don't know how they like wrote or structured the songs, but I'm pretty sure Scott probably did what he was asked to do. But I'm sure he came up with incredible things to do.
Oh, what was Punk Money?
Punk Money. Are we allowed to talk about this on camera?
Sure. I know everybody has been. That company doesn't even exist anymore.
Okay, good. Well, you couldn't get hired at the State Tri if you didn't know about Punk Money. And what we would do is there'd be someone taking tickets at the door, and they would pretend to tear a ticket and hand you an already torn ticket. I was really bad at that. That's why I didn't work taking tickets. But and then we would resell whole tickets from the booth, and we'd tally up how many resold tickets we would resell, divvy up the money at the end of the night, as well as with empty cups and tubs from the theaters. We would go get used ones, kind of clean them out, and resell those, and then tally how many we'd sold with those, divvy up the money at the end of the night. And the managers were in on it and everything. So you couldn't just be an employee there, you had to know about the scam to get hired there.
And what did you guys use the money for?
I remember that I made so much money working like double shifts on the weekends and just during the week. And again, I was probably 16 or 17 when I worked there. And I just started playing in this band, Love is Laughter. And my bandmate had got this really cool pedal that had a 4-second delay, which was such a long span of delay time in 1995. And I wanted a 4-second delay so bad. So I saved all my punk money and bought a like $450 pedal, which is long gone. But.
What do you think the relationship is, if any, between the rents being the prices that they were and people being able to spend all their time playing music?
That was why there was so much great stuff going on at that time, was because the rent was insanely cheap. The Martin rent at the time was probably, $300. Now it's like nearly $7 probably. But you could work 20 hours. I basically worked 25 hours a week for like almost 7 years. I eventually started working more towards the end, but it seemed like I was playing in 5 bands all the time and barely working and just having a great time all the time.
And that was like the norm in the town?
That was pretty much the norm. I'm sure a lot of people worked a lot harder than I did, I'm sure, but I feel like I worked hard on music the whole time. Yeah, it was total freedom. You really, especially if you were, carp or unwound, you would tour and come home and barely have to nobody really, except for Scott, really had Jared had random jobs, Chris had random jobs, but mostly you could just live there without working and pay rent very easily. Just maybe work very little so you can play a whole lot.
Why leave a place like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I left because it was too small and too white, and just run a good thing into the ground probably. Get jaded, whatever.
So now, looking back at all the things that happened, what do you think about when you think about Carp and those guys?
I mean, mostly I think about how fun it was to hang out and see them play, but looking back, it was like extremely fucking dramatic, which is so weird. Like, Bikini Kill had their share of drama, but it was more between them, but for some reason, Carp's drama involved everyone.
I think Sean referred to Chris trying to take his own life as the Altamont, I believe.
See, someone like Sean is so much better to talk to about these things. He'll come up with, Chris being the Altamont of Carp.
Cool. All right. Well, any final statements?
I don't think I can think of anything.
It's okay.
Well, I hope some redneck out there was turned on to Carp and maybe had their lives changed or something.
Oh yeah, tell me who real quick. Who are the redneck pricks?
Oh, gosh, I don't know who they're referring to. Probably just the kids at their school and their parents and all these horrible people they had to grow up with. I had to grow up around a lot of logging rednecks too in Northern California. The loggers.
So you think the loggers were the redneck pricks?
Maybe. Maybe it's because Olympia is the state capital. No, those. Yeah, I would say the logging community.